What is neurocuriosity? I'll be totally honest with you, it's a word that I kinda made up. And I say kinda because I know it existed before I thought of it like a week ago. But I intend to do some deep work on neurocuriosity and really define what it is and how it is useful in the neurodivergent community. So what is neurocuriosity? It's exactly what it sounds like. It's being curious about your brain, being curious about your neurotype, being curious about where you fit in the neurodiversity paradigm. Hi there, my name is Megan. I am auDHD, meaning I am autistic and ADHD, and this is the Neurocuriosity Club, where we help people explore their brains. Today we're just unpacking what the term neurocuriosity means and how we can use it moving forward. See, this channel used to be called Neurodivergent Magic, and I loved that name, and I think it served me for a while, but I also think it maybe did some people harm, and that's the last thing I want to do. The reason the name Neurodivergent Magic was harmful to some people is because even though I use the name Neurodivergent Magic, most of my videos are about autism and ADHD. And the last thing I want to do is perpetuate this idea that neurodivergence equals autism and ADHD, because believe me, it is so much more. Neurodivergence is a huge umbrella. It is meant to be as inclusive, not exclusive, as possible. There are neurodevelopmental disabilities like autism and ADHD. There are acquired forms of neurodivergence that you are not born with, but rather acquire later in life, like trauma or traumatic brain injury or Alzheimer's. There are neurological conditions that are included under the neurodivergent umbrella, including epilepsy. All mental illnesses are included under the neurodivergent umbrella. So as you can see, when I used to make videos saying like, oh, 21 signs you might be neurodivergent, and then I listed signs of autism and ADHD, you can see how that would be harmful to some people, right? And now I can see that. And therefore we are rebranding, we are changing the name. This is the Neurocuriosity Club. So why did I go with neurocuriosity instead of just saying ADHD and autism? Well, because even though ADHD and autism are my diagnoses now, they weren't for a long time. I spent about a decade wondering where I fit under that neurodivergent umbrella. And for a long time, I didn't fit anywhere. And I know how lonely and hard that can be. And I don't want you going through that. So I decided to create a space where people could come and question their neurodivergence and question, maybe I'm autistic and ADHD, which there will still be tons of content about that on this channel because I am autistic and ADHD. But also like, what if I have borderline personality disorder? Or what if I am bipolar? What if I have Tourette's, you know? And even though I can't speak to those things directly through my lived experience, I can do a ton of research on those things. And I'm also thinking about interviewing people on this channel because I think it's really important that if I say neurocuriosity and I want to embrace people who are curious about their brains, I don't just inform them about autism and ADHD. I want to inform you about all kinds of neurodivergence under that neurodivergent umbrella. Now, I know there's probably some of you watching thinking, is this channel really right for me anymore? Because I'm not necessarily neurocurious. I'm diagnosed. I know that I'm autistic. I know that I'm bipolar. I know that I'm OCD. Is this channel still okay for me? And the answer is yes, of course, if it feels right to you. Just like the neurodivergent umbrella, I want the Neurocuriosity Club to be inclusive, not exclusive. Which means if you're watching this and you have a diagnosis, for sure, you're more than welcome. And if you're watching this and you don't have a diagnosis and you feel like a total imposter and you're not sure if you belong here, you do. Because here's the thing. I would so much rather accept a neurotypical into the club or whatever and invite them in and teach them things and then have them later realize, oh, actually, I'm pretty sure I'm neurotypical and not neurodivergent in any way. I would so much rather do that than say, no, you're not welcome because you might be neurotypical. To me, that does way more harm than it does to accept someone into the Neurocuriosity Club who later finds out that they're neurotypical. A lot of people like to say that neurotypical people don't spend this much time wondering if they're neurodivergent. And people say this as a way to reassure people who are questioning or confused or neurocurious. They say it as like, well, if you're questioning whether you're neurodivergent this much, you probably are. And to that I would say yes. And yes, it's true that people who are neurotypical and therefore easily fit into the neurotypical standards of our society are less likely to question if they might not fit those things, because they know they fit those things. They don't even realize how well they fit those things. They fit them without trying. And so if you don't fit neurotypical standards, or you find yourself struggling to fit into society's expectations, yeah, there's a very good chance that you fit under the neurodivergent umbrella somewhere. And I also want to point out that questioning whether you are a particular type of neurodivergence doesn't necessarily make you that type of neurodivergent. My favorite example of this comes from my life, and that is when I was misdiagnosed with bipolar disorder at my own request. See, I took a depression screener online because I knew I was depressed, but I wanted someone to confirm it. I wanted the internet to tell me I was as depressed as I felt. And I took this screener, and at the end it said, yes, you definitely show lots of signs of depression, but also, like, you might want to talk to a doctor about bipolar disorder. And from there, I went down the rabbit hole. Knowing now that I'm autistic, I know that what I was experiencing was something called monotropic spiral, which is basically when the autistic focus on a special interest gets so deep that it starts curving in on itself and leads to a truly obsessive experience. Don't worry, we'll talk more about monotropic spiral in a different video. But at the time, nobody saw it that way. Everybody just said, oh, you know, people who aren't bipolar don't question if they're bipolar this much. You must be bipolar. And I think these people were trying to be reassuring. They really were, but I think they missed the mark just a little bit. Because here's what I would say now to someone who is obsessing over their mental health. I wouldn't tell you that whatever diagnosis you're obsessed with has to be the right one because people who don't have that don't obsess the way that you are. I wouldn't say that necessarily. Here's what I would say. People who are mentally healthy and not disabled don't go looking for labels of mental illness or disability. Even in the rare case that someone is faking or exaggerating their mental illness, that in and of itself is a mental illness. Here's what else I would say. Your pain is real no matter what it's called. Now, I had a lot of people try to tell me that the label doesn't matter and diagnosis is more of an art than a science, and all of that is true. It's just not very comforting when you're in that spirally kind of place. What has been comforting, to me at least, is knowing that my pain is real and my pain matters no matter what it's called. And by the way, diagnosis does matter. Let's say, for example, you go to the doctor because you have a fever. Sure, they can give you a fever reduction medication, but if you're going to the fever because you have a bacterial infection, that fever reduction medication is only going to treat the symptoms, not the cause. It's important to know where our pain comes from, because that tells us how best to heal it. And also, it should be noted, and I promise this is my last caveat on this topic, that the DSM was not handed down from on high. Those diagnoses are made up categories that, yeah, hopefully work, but are ever evolving and changing. So where does that leave you as a neurocurious person? Well, I hope it leaves you open to curiosity, open to different answers, open to being wrong, open to being right, and just generally open-minded. I know a lot of autistic folks especially, but also folks with borderline personality disorder and sometimes folks with ADHD really struggle with black and white thinking. So sometimes it's hard to be open-minded. Believe me, I get that. And I hope that this channel becomes a place that you can come to when you're feeling a little lost, a little alone, a little confused, and maybe a little curious. Because it's okay not to know. I'll see you next week.